We're live.
We're here, and let's see. No more excuses. We're just a tad late, and maybe it's just the nature of the beast here sometimes. So welcome, Capt Ron here with Fearless Flight Live, our weekly Facebook show for people out there who are afraid to fly, people who know somebody's afraid to fly, and people who just like to chat with us about the aviation industry. Tonight we have a regular show for you, and we have a special guest you can see on our screen there. Our special guest is Susan Hopkins, and she's especially got a warm spot in my heart because we've known each other for, oh my gosh, coming up on a long time. Yeah, so a long time in terms of Fearless Flight standards here anyway. And also with me, of course, Eric Larson up there rubbing his brow, and Dieter Staudinger down the lower corner. Our resident flight attendant, Diane, is off doing some personal tasks. So we're glad to have you here tonight. On the show, we're gonna talk to Susan here first, and the theme this week and should be every week is changing the way you think about flying, because when it boils down to it, that's really what happens. And we'll talk. There were some things that happened in the industry this week, and Eric is going to help me highlight those. And I got a couple of questions from people that wrote in, and we'll work on those. So I want to get this ready here. I've got a slide that I want to show. Okay, we'll hold that up. Susan, it's awesome that you did this. Let me just further acknowledge you. This young woman is here visiting Phoenix, and she let me know that she was coming, so I went out and met her at the airport yesterday. And then I had the gall to say, hey, how about, would you like to be on the show tonight? So she's interrupting her tourism here just to be on the show for us. So I really appreciate it, Susan. Let me share the picture that we took yesterday. Let me figure this out. I'm going to do that. Desktop number 2. And here we go. Custom show. Okay, play from current slide. So can you see that? I think should be going out live. So this is when we met at the airport. I walked right up to Susan and I said, how are you doing? Good.
I kind of like to fly now. Over the ocean next.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I kind of like to fly now. Over the ocean next.
Okay. All right. Oh, here we're.
I kind of like to fly now. Over the ocean next.
Okay. Of course, I forgot to hit the share button. So anyway, so I wanted to get that on tape so I could blackmail you for now or for more if you say I can't fly. So anyway, so just a few questions, Susan. How did you find us, Fearless Flight, in the first place? And when did
I from Susan Migliaccio.
Oh, that's right. Our other Susan in Boston. Yeah. And what were the circumstances? I mean, most people would understand that you hadn't flown for a while. How long had it been since you've flown? And what was a little bit of the history to that? My
last flight was on our honeymoon, which was November of 1972.
Holy
long
moly.
time. 50.
But you're still married, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We want to make sure that the flying was the only thing that you dropped from your life at that point in time.
Yeah, so, there was. Yeah.
And what was it? Was it something about the flight? Was it No. Just
nothing about the flight. I can't even tell you what originally triggered this. But you just
developed that feeling and that knowingness that flying was not for you.
It wasn't so much the flying, it's I'm more claustrophobic.
Okay.
It's being in a situation that I can't get out of if I feel a panic attack coming on.
Okay. And it's kind of neat having you here tonight, because in March, I'm going to go back to Boston and we're going to fly with whoever wants to fly with us again in Boston. Right. So yeah. If you would, I think you took the 201, the online course, and then you you flew with us there. Would you just share a few words about what the online course, how it helped you, or what you remember about that? Anything that was helpful, and then a little bit about the flight.
It was all terrific learning experience. I wouldn't have never got to Phoenix, that's for sure, if I hadn't have taken the course.
Yeah. And when I came out there to Boston that morning, what was it like when we all showed up at the airport there and we're getting ready to go to Baltimore?
It was exhilarating, and it was also very frightening.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was one of the best flights in terms of what you like to see as someone trying to help people, in that we had a little bit of everything. We had winter conditions, we had a little snow, we had a little rain, at one point we had turbulence, I think on both legs. We had a tire change, I think, when we got to Baltimore, we had to wait on to come back. And then but you all did marvelously. And that's so often what I see is just people laughing and joking and things like that. So anyway.
I think it was comforting for me to be with other people that knew exactly what I was feeling.
Yeah. Eric has commented on that before, that the best part for me is watching people just support each other. Because normally report when they get to the airport and they're flying on their own or without anybody else that is afraid to fly, they look around and they feel alone, they feel isolated, they're worried about what people would think if they knew them like that. But I remember you all showing up. We were laughing and joking, and I mean, you could tell there was some tension because we all knew what we were going to do. But there was that nobody seemed to be worried in particular about anybody else out around us except for just. And I think that's the power of the group.
Right. No, there were many times over those 50 years that my husband said, "Let's take a short flight somewhere. I'll be there with you. It'll be okay." But in my head, that wasn't going to work because he doesn't know what I'm feeling when the panic strikes.
Sure. And we'll cut this short. Just coming as you prepared to come to Phoenix. Well, you had another flight too. I think you went down to Wilmington, wasn't it?
North Carolina, Raleigh.
Okay. Oh, Raleigh. That's right. And what was that? Because you hadn't flown since March, right? So it had been a little. Yeah. And how was that?
That was a little nerve-wracking for me because I hadn't flown in like 6 months or so.
Right.
But it went fine. And
you stayed connected to the group. You've been on the looking at the coaching calls that we've done month. And you texted me when you had questions and things like that. And as you prepared coming out here, did you have any anxiety last week as you got closer to flying yesterday?
A little bit, but nothing that was overwhelming that was going to hold me back for sure.
Right. And I remember vividly when you got to the airport in Boston, and when I walked up to you yesterday at baggage claim in Phoenix, and the first thing you said was what I recorded there. You said, it's so gratifying to see that, and it's believable. I mean, I think people can other than me can look at you and say, you don't look like the same person that that showed up in Boston last year.
Yeah.
So. And you have any thought? Are you able to enjoy yourself here in Phoenix so far? Or because that's one of my biggest goals is so you don't ruin your trip worrying about the flight home.
Right. No, I'm not worried about the flight home. We actually were going to take a long drive up to the Grand Canyon, but that's all snowed in, and we're advised not to go.
Oh,
so we went down to Old Town Scottsdale today, which was nice. And I think tomorrow we're going to go see there's an Air Force Museum in Mesa.
I think there is one in Mesa, right, Eric?
Falcon Field.
Falcon Field. I think that's the commemorative Air Force, probably.
Right, that's it.
Yeah. And then if you go down to Tucson, if you venture out there's a couple of museums down there. One is a storage area where they keep commercial civilian airplanes, and then there's one there's an Air Force base down there, Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, and they have a lot of old Air Force and military airplanes down there. So
Okay, I'd interest my husband, so we'll probably look into that.
Yeah. But the one in I think it's World War II birds a lot over in Mesa.
Yeah.
So any words of wisdom, and then we want to keep you on the show here. We're going to talk about some other things if you got an opinion on them. But
just put the work in and eventually you'll get there.
And I just wish everybody could, it's when I see some ads, like particularly for some of the airlines, like EasyJet has a program over in England, and nothing to take away from their program, but a one-time deal is misleading, I think, to a lot of people, because you got to kind of stay engaged. Wouldn't you agree?
Mhm.
You got to,
Oh, yeah.
you got to keep yourself immersed in the things that
Mhm.
help. And you're a wonderful example of somebody who's just hung in there and stayed with it despite doubts that you might have had along the way and whatnot. So I just want to, thank you for hanging in there and commending you, Susan. So anyway,
Thank you.
thanks.
I need to thank you for the work that you've put in to get me where I am. So
Well, you're welcome. So anyway,
thank you.
right. So hang with us. We're going to talk about some other things here. The first thing I wanted to bring up was we had a couple of incidents in the news, and I hate that because, it freaks out some people. And we try to say, look, whenever you see something in the news, try to get some informed opinions about what's going on. And I'm talking about there was an airplane crash, a small commuter type airplane that crashed in Nepal on the other side of the world. And then there was an incident here that got more press, probably more awareness over here in the U.S. And that was the deal with the runway incursion there. So I'm gonna put that up on the screen there. Eric, talk just a little bit about what we know about the Nepal crash.
So in Nepal, there was a commuter airplane, as we call them, as Ron said, a high performance turboprop, very high performance turboprop, an ATR-72. And it was flying from Kathmandu to another airport. And the airport it was approaching had parallel runways. And the controllers at the airport asked the pilots to switch runways. They were fairly close in, but not too close to make that maneuver. And when the pilots started to turn left, they either lost awareness of their speed or made, I'll let Ron elaborate on this, what we call an uncoordinated turn, but by doing so shielded the airflow over the inside, or in this case, the left wing, to the point where the wing aerodynamically stalled. And we've talked about this in the show before. I hate the term stall because then everybody thinks the engine quit. What we mean is when a wing aerodynamically stalls, it's no longer producing lift. And if the airplane is turned either too slowly or improperly, and that airflow is shielded, and the wing stalled, and the other wing is no lift, then the airplane rolls over very hard and very fast, and that's what happened. And they were too low to the ground to recover from that, and they hit the ground, and it was a fatal accident all on board.
And all we can assume right now is it more than likely was operator error, and until we hear something different. The type airplane they were flying, they're I don't know, they're used in other parts of the world. We don't see those in the U.S. anymore, though, right?
Yes, the ATR is a very capable airplane, and I see it a lot in the Caribbean. But if you Google Roselawn, Indiana airplane crash, it will come up, and the ATR was used frequently in the United States, but that was the case where icing did the same thing to the wing, destroyed so much lift on the wings. There was a fatal plane crash, and all the U.S. operators quit using it here domestically because it was more susceptible to lift loss from icing problems than other airplanes, and that was the end of that airplane for all intents and purposes for passenger use in the United States. But in Caribbean and elsewhere where it's warm and stuff, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. And let's move on to something that it certainly generated more questions to me this week and emails, was the runway incursion up in JFK with the two airliners. You want to talk about that, Eric? And
Sure. You want to throw up that Do you want to throw up that taxi plate so people can follow along and kind of understand what's happening? Can you do?
Okay, let me go. Let me get that up there and desktop 2. Okay, I think it should be up.
So this is a ground road map that we would use taxiing around airports to orient ourselves and figure out where we're going and follow clearances. And you can see here at Kennedy, it's extremely complicated, and there's a lot of taxiways and a lot of taxiway markings here. But what happened?
Let me throw one thing out there, Eric.
Okay,
You know,
sure.
when people look at this, if you know, this is kind of like, to me, what people, the experience people might have when they look inside the cockpit. You look at that and your first reaction is, oh my God, how can you make any sense out of that? So it's not that way for us. But in all fairness, it's not that easy either, because one of the things, and this was at night, and
Yes.
one of the dilemmas is around an airport is you got to be able to see the runway and traffic and all that. What you don't want to be blocked is by billboards, and like if you were on the highway, and like traffic signs and all that. So everything is down low to the ground, and at night it's dimly lit, and so it's much more of a challenge, and that's why major airports like this have ground radar as well. It operate in low vis. So anyway, so I just wanted to kind of give a context for this, because we're going to talk about some things that happened here, and it's not like these guys, you know, were out there, you know, just not paying attention or anything. So go ahead.
Right. All my pilot friends that I talked to, their reaction, there was no reaction of, gee, how stupid was that? The reaction from all my friends was, oh, there but the grace of God go I, and how utterly sickened they must have been by making this error. But nevertheless, the American airplane came out of a terminal at the top. If you see where it says International Arrival Terminal, U.S. Customs, and you look up from there, there's taxiways that circle the whole airport. And they were cleared on taxiway Bravo to taxi down to runway 4 left. So they were starting along that taxiway where Ron is the red airplane and arrow on this circle taxiway Bravo that goes all the way around down here. And the controller had told them at Kilo, which Bravo turns into, there we go, at Kilo, which Bravo turns into, to cross runway 31 left and continue to taxi to runway 4 left, where the green airplane is. For some reason, when they got to taxiway Juliet, either they or the captain was confused. Instead of going straight or making that little left turn jog on Kilo, which could have confused him because he had to make a slight left turn, he made a 90-degree left turn on Juliet and crossed runway 4 left, confusing it for runway 31 left. Unfortunately, the green airplane down there was a Delta 737 that had been issued a takeoff clearance and had started the roll. And this is a chart, it's to scale. I measure that off to there, and it's about 4,650 feet from the threshold of where the Delta plane was to where the American airplane started across. And it was tough to see that at night, but the part of the US safety systems, and I think less than 10 years old, is a really cool deal called the Airport Service Detection Equipment /X ASDEX monitor. And that monitors the position of airplanes all over the airport and where they're going and what they're doing. Well, when that monitor detected the American airplane crossing a runway that an airplane had a takeoff clearance on, a whole bunch of alarms went off in the tower, and the controllers were stunned momentarily by what's happening. And then they saw what was going on. The controller recovered fast enough to tell Delta to cancel his takeoff clearance. They told him twice, and the Delta guy picked up on it right away and just said rejecting, and performed a rejected takeoff maneuver. And the airplane was already, from early reports, had accelerated to 109 knots, which is about 120 miles an hour. So it was going pretty fast, accelerating hard. But the pilots performed correctly the takeoff rejection maneuver. And with max auto braking, which functions in a rejected takeoff mode, the airplane was able to stop and haul it down very fast. If you'd been in the back of the Delta airplane, that would have been an exceedingly violent ride into the seats in front of you. But nevertheless, they did the job, and the airplane systems did the job, and they stopped 1,000 feet short of the intersection where the American airplane had intruded. So disaster was averted by crew competence there, that surface detection equipment, and that mitigated a horrible disaster, prevented a horrible disaster.
So the things that we would like you to leave you with is not the fact that a mistake was made, but, and of course we don't like to rely on this, but it was a backup precaution or backup measure that actually averted the accident, and that was the tower's warning system. And they elected to, or they told the Delta airplane to abort their takeoff. So, what can we say? Eric nor I wouldn't ever tell you that there isn't risk involved in takeoff in aviation. But what we would tell you is that the lengths to which we go to manage those risks is extraordinary, and that's why safe flying is the safest way to travel on the planet. Having said that, there's another thing that I've mentioned from time to time is when things happen like this, and fortunately there was no injury, there was no loss of life, and we're so grateful as human beings when we can prevent that. But when things happen, whether there were injuries and loss of life or not, there's a term called necessary fallibility. And that means that wherever there's humans involved, there are going to be mistakes that are made. And one of the things, the second best thing to not having a mistake in the first place and catching the mistake is to have it happen and blissfully nobody died in this case, but to alert us so that we take a look at what we're doing and then look and see if there's any loopholes, if there's any weak links in the chain that we need to do. And that's what aviation is so good at. I have a couple of notes here tonight, I just for fun, just for grins, I looked up worst traffic accident or worst pileups. And there was one, ironically, it happened to be when I was on a layover up in Sacramento. And it was coming down I-5 there. The airport in Sacramento is north of the city. And there's an interstate that runs down there, and they burn off the rice fields every year. And and sometimes, and this is what happened today, we had arrived there and we were at the hotel. We had traveled down this highway just 15 minutes prior to this accident. I got to my hotel room, I turned on the news, and there was like a gazillion car pileup on the freeway just south of the airport in the area that we had just traveled. Because what had happened is they were burning the fields off, and all of a sudden the wind shifted and it blew all the smoke in an instant over the highway. And you've got vehicles traveling 70, 75 miles an hour. And of course, the first ones that experience that, they slam on their brakes, and then everybody behind them goes into the cloud. And they had within 6 minutes, all of the fatalities that happened in that first 6 minutes. It was chaos. I don't know how long after that, and then I just Googled bus crashes, because that's another option for traveling from point A to point B. And one of the worst bus crashes was down in Kentucky back in I believe 1991, where 27 people were killed on a school bus accident down there. So I'm going to throw this out to people. If you would leave us a response or comment. Have you ever elected not to get on a bus or not to travel in a car, or do you willingly jump in an Uber when when you're getting to and from the airport during your travels like that? Because the things that I feel obligated, I hope it doesn't sound offensive, but to compare to the airline industry, if we looked at with the same excruciating diligence at automobile accidents in this country, the way we look at airplane accidents, we wouldn't kill 35 to 40,000 people every year. and that to me, it's tragic that still happens, but aviation continues to be safe. It's never going to be perfect. And I'm grateful for having learned what I did in my career. I'm grateful for having a career that I didn't hurt anybody or myself. And I'm sure Eric feels the same way. And so we hope that this adds some kind of balance in your mind so that you don't continue to freak out about the fact that we had a fatal accident somewhere in the world this week, and we had a near accident up in the JFK airport there. Anything else?
Ron, I just want to jump in there. Mark had a question about the Yeti Airlines crash, and that is because he's got a flight coming up, I think, tomorrow. And so what scared him about it is the pilots, and the way I'm thinking about this is like, playing my Microsoft Flight Simulator and just go too hard left. And so too much, and that basically, so how would you respond to Mark? I mean, one of the things that I put in chat is that you can't even compare, the circumstances of the crash to normal commercial aviation. And I will also say Europe banned the Nepalese airlines, and yet so Yeti Airlines is one of them, from its airspace because of concerns about training and aircraft maintenance. So Nepalese airlines, including Yeti Airlines, aren't even flying in Europe. So
I'll throw this out real quick, Eric, and then I'll throw it to you. What I heard you alluding to is we're talking about probably operator error. All right. And that would validate what Mark just speculated on, or Dieter did, is over controlling. And one of the things that surprised me in my career is, you think you go into the simulator to practice the correct response to things that can come up that we could never practice in a real airplane. What I learned and what I was surprised at is sometimes the correct response is not a response at all. One of the hardest things to learn as a human being is not to overreact. And you all know the consequences. If you're a passenger sitting in the back and we hit some wake turbulence climbing out, that is the turbulence left by an airplane departing ahead of us, that's very shocking. And people will jump in the back of the airplane like that. I've seen people that I've flown with, immediately try to control the yoke on the airplane to adjust the bank angle to level it out or something. And I cautioned them. I said, don't do anything because, the airplane is so stable, it levels itself under circumstances like that. So the wrong thing to do would be to over control it. And again, I'll turn it to you, Eric, but I think that to me, and we always brag about not judging people in advance. So this is not a good thing to do, but I would say that it sounds like it was an overreaction to an input that they didn't anticipate.
Highly likely, and I was going to jump to a quick explanation of what we call coordinated flight. The rudder on the tail is used for directional control of the airplane when maneuvering the airplane, particularly under single engine conditions, but on normal flight as well. So when the airplane banks and turns, the rudder is used to keep the airplane pointed smoothly into what we call the relative wind, the forward-facing wind. And the rudder is used in connection with the ailerons in a turn. And if you apply too much or too little of it, we call it a skidding or slipping turn, where the airplane moves sideways through the air instead of directly into it. And if you don't use the rudder properly and make that coordinated turn, when you're either skidding or slipping, you, as I said earlier, can shield one wing or the other from direct oncoming airflow and greatly reduce its ability to produce lift. So using the rudder to make a coordinated turn is very important, not only for passenger comfort in the back, but for aircraft control. And ultimately, that's probably what happened here. The turn was, we would say, uncoordinated, leading to this production of the stall on the left wing.
It was about my 4th flight ever in a Cessna 172 at the Air Force Academy with my instructor, very experienced. And what you do before you solo is you go out and you climb to altitude so you can't hurt yourself or anybody on the ground. And you slow the airplane up and you explore the flight characteristics when you get to where the airplane flies less efficiently, we'll say. And we were very aggressive in the way that we learned this. So we pulled the nose up 45 degrees, which is pretty steep when you're a rookie like me. And then you wait literally until the airplane runs out of airspeed, and then the nose drops rather dramatically. And then as it accelerates, it flies right back up. And so the first couple of times that happened, I'm thrashing about there and I'm sweating. I literally, every pore in my body is soaked, and I'm doing that. And my instructor is watching me. So he says, do it again. So we pulled it up there and I start to thrash on the flight controls again. And he taps me on the shoulder. He says, just let go, Ron. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Why would I let go? And he said, no, just let go. And I let go, and the airplane just gradually just picks up speed, goes back up, level flight all by itself. And he said, remember that sometimes it does better without you. And that's probably served me better than anything else, certainly at low speed performance in an airplane. And like I said, when they're in the traffic pattern, they're slowing the airplane down to those flight regimes where you have to be very, very aware of the margins that you have. And things can go to hell in a handbasket quickly if you mishandle the airplane. So unfortunately, that looks like it may have been the case over there. So, okay. One last coaching or inquiry I had this week, which I think would be helpful to everybody, because this is probably the most common question I get. I never a day or a week passes without somebody saying something like this. So let me read the actual narrative here. I had a coaching student that was flying to LA over the weekend and said, made it to LA overall pretty well today, despite some light, moderate chop over the Rockies today. He was coming from the East Coast. I worked through the breathing with my iPhone stopwatch and listened to the harmonizer. So one of the things that we worked on is that new breathing that we've been talking about that seems to respond to your heart rate variability, where you inhale 4 seconds and exhale 6 seconds for a 10-second exchange of air. And he said, so he did pretty well. He said, new question, any suggestions on what I should do during turbulence when my mind says, you can handle these bumps, but what if it gets worse than this? That is the essence of everybody that we work with. And it's a thing about a mind. I had a 15-minute coaching call this morning, and the fella, very acute, he's done some CBT therapy, doing the right things, and he explained to me, he says he gets all this anticipatory anxiety. He claims he's good on the airplane, he knows that it's safe and all that, but he just can't stand the thought of them closing the door, and he feels trapped. And then he said, but when the pilots come on the mic or the PA and they advertise that we're about to start our final descent, he says, I get excited. And I said, you need no more validation that it is something that takes place between your ears. And so to him and to the fellow that just landed in LA and wants to know, what do I do when my mind says, but what if? You do the same things you did before you got to where you were doing that well and had the additional what ifs. When you get what ifs like that, you go back to the basics. You learn more about the airplane. You learn more about your fear. You learn how to interrupt your thoughts so that you can do an intervention on yourself. You hang around people like the people on our Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather group and on the show here, and you just keep working it. And Susan Hopkins is a great example. And I want to thank Susan again for volunteering to come on here. Of all the things that I would think I would not want to do is talk to Captain Ron when I'm on a vacation here, but she's a delightful soul, has a good heart to do that. So I want to thank her for doing that. Other than that, again, tonight, what we were hoping to do is just talk about how the essence of overcoming fear of flying is changing the way you think about flying. And we like we do all the time, or we strive to do, we don't want to stick our heads in the sand when there are real mistakes that happen out there in the world. We tried to address those up front and tell you that, sometimes it happens. And fortunately, it could have been a real catastrophe up in Kennedy, but there was a backup system in place and it averted a real bad situation there. And then some real feedback from not only Susan, but from the people that wrote to me this week who are out there doing the work, doing the flying. You got to keep on keeping on. You got to keep doing the stuff that we talked about. Before we go, we want to announce Dieter has put together the two upcoming Clear for Takeoff 301 classes on March, help me dear, 11th.
Boston is March 11, correct?
Yep.
And Burbank, Los Angeles, that's March 25th. And the link is in, I think I've pinned it even. The link is in the chat already. And as always, if you're anywhere in the Boston and LA area and you're even remotely thinking about flying with us, now is the time to get the tickets. In the flight information, you also see what currently the prices are so far out. So prices go up the closer we get to those dates. So do yourself a favor, sign up for the class with us. You get the flight information and head over to Southwest and get yourself those tickets. So
If you're enrolled in the 201, or you have been enrolled in the 201 course and are currently in one of the membership programs where you have access, if you have access to the 201, you get it for a discount. You get it for $200 cheaper than it is if you just want to fly. We'll fly with anybody. Anybody wants to fly, come out and fly with us, okay? But it's cheaper if you are enrolled in the course or you're still staying current in the course. And to our advantage, Southwest had some tough times over the holidays. They are running sales almost every week right now to get some loyalty back. So as Dieter mentioned, earlier is better than later when in terms of getting the closer to the actual flight date. And certainly right now, you might still jump in and get some lower fares there. I've purchased my tickets. I'm going to go in and see if they drop the price, because if they have, they'll give me a credit or a refund on the credit normally on the difference in the price there. So anyway, so we're gonna do that. We've got our monthly live coaching call coming up just 2 nights from now, this Thursday night. Again, Dieter will put a link in the show notes for that. We'd love to have any and all of you there. We're going to talk in more detail about quieting that chatter up there. And what do you do for this very problem that this person wrote to me? How do I quit worrying about worrying? Okay, so we're going to do that. And we've called it here Fear of Flying 911, because we want to give you some things that you can do at the last minute if you haven't done anything else or everything seems to have gone away. So okay. So thanks again to Susan. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Dieter. And thanks to all of you for tuning in this week. We enjoy doing this, and any feedback you can get us on things you want us to talk about, questions you have, or just, anything on your mind, we really welcome that. So take care. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
I'll leave you guys with a quick one. Don't shut us off yet. The turbulence question where somebody said, well, it's okay, I just hope it doesn't get any worse. I'll tell you what the pilots are thinking. They're thinking, geez, this is kind of miserable. I just hope it doesn't get any worse. They're thinking the exact same thing as you are, except for they know the airplane isn't going to tip over or plummet. They just hope it isn't going to get any worse. So they're on the same track as you're on.
Yeah. Okay. See you next week, everybody.
See ya.